The reading is taken from Joshua chapter 2, verses 1 to 14, and then chapter 6, verses 22 to 25. Then Joshua, the son of Nun, secretly sent out 2 spies from Shittim. "Go, look over the land," he said, "especially Jericho." So they went and they entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, "Look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land." So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab: "Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them, and she said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I do not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go quickly after them. You may catch up with them." But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of the flax that she laid on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan, and as soon as the pursuers had gone, the gate was shut. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up to the roof and said to them, "I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Ammonites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family because I've shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and my mother and my brothers and sisters and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death." "Our lives for your lives," the men assured her. "If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land." Chapter 6, 22. Joshua said to the 2 men who had spied out the land, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring her out and all who belong to her in accordance with your oath with her." So the young men who had done the spying went in, and they brought out Rahab, her father and mother, her brothers and sisters, and all who belonged to her. They brought out the entire family, and they put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. And then they burned the whole city and everything in it. But they put the silver and the gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute, with her family and all who belonged to her, because she had hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho. And she lives amongst the Israelites to this day. Thanks be to God.
Carol, thank you for reading so beautifully. That was a blessing just to hear it, wasn't it? Real blessing. Let's pray together. Father, we thank you that you are for us. We praise you for that. And Father, we thank you that you want us to, as we step into 2023, to be even more firmly rooted and grounded in love. And so, Lord, as we come before your word, may we be good receivers of your grace. And Father, grow us, grow our ability to share and express your grace for Jesus' glory. Amen. Amen. It's interesting. I've got a great friend who often says about church service, he says, one of the great things about the reading of the scriptures is that you always know at least one part of the service will be inspired. Because the Lord's word is always inspired. So we've been blessed with the way that's been read today, incredibly. So the start of 2023, I wonder what you're dreaming about. You don't need to tell, so I'm not asking people to share publicly. But we're beginning a series in our mornings on the theme of dreaming of grace. And over our Christmas services, which, the Lord graciously used, I think, really greatly, we were thinking about the wonder of the comfort and joy that the gift of Jesus brings. And part of my heart for this morning series is that each of us might grow as a receiver of God's grace, and individually and together we might grow as givers of God's grace more freely. And so we're going to be looking at one or two slightly kind of unusual characters. I'm speaking about Rahab. As you'll see, Paul Barber is going to be speaking about Jonah next week. Mark will be speaking about Levi. Matt will be speaking about the early church. And we're looking about what's it mean to dream of grace and to receive and be givers of God's grace before we get into another series early in Feb. So, Rahab. The book of Joshua, I think we need to understand as we look back on it through Jesus' eyes. The book of Joshua offers us a promise as to what the church can begin to move into when we step into the promises of God, the promises of his kingdom. And so please hold that in your head as we think about this passage today. And on assuming the leadership of the nation of Israel after Moses' death, Joshua by this stage was a very seasoned general. And as a seasoned general, he was very astute about what was needed in order to gain victory for his troops. And the people of Israel have crossed the Jordan, and they're needing to step into the promised land. And Joshua is very aware there are a number of strongholds that need to be taken. And the most prominent one was Jericho. Jericho was on a very imposing, in a sense, was in a very commanding position and would have been a very imposing presence as the people of Israel were looking into the promised land. And so, being a shrewd general, Joshua sends two spies to spy out the land, to assess the city, the city's sort of protection and how vulnerable the city would be to attack. How might he and his troops take that stronghold? And these two spies find lodging with this Canaanite prostitute called Rahab. Now, some people have suggested she was an ex-prostitute. I'm not persuaded by that. As I look at the story, as I read the commentaries, I think there's a bit of kind of, we're wanting to domesticate it and make it a bit nicer for us. I think if she was an ex-prostitute, she wouldn't have opened up her home to two strangers quite as readily as she did. But Rahab is central to God's plans in helping his people move into greater freedom. That's always God's desire for us, to move into greater wholeness, greater freedom. And Rahab is an unsung hero here. God graciously uses Rahab in an amazing way. And I think as we look at this story, Rahab wants to ask us three questions, first of all. And the first question is this: what do you gossip about? What do you gossip about? Some of you will say, well, Andy, I don't gossip. Well, I hope we don't gossip negatively, but I think most of us do chatter about any number of things. You see, Rahab somehow had heard. She had heard. We read, I know that the Lord, this is Rahab speaking to the two spies, I know the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt. We have heard. Now, as a prostitute, I would imagine that Rahab would have had lots of secrets shared with her. That, prostitutes are a bit like hairdressers, and I'm not wanting to compare the two professions. Just to be clear for a moment, so please don't misunderstand. We've got some really gifted barbers and hairdressers here. Fantastic. But I think in those contexts, people let their guard down. And people chat. People kind of gossip. And I think some of Rahab's customers must have gossiped about what God had done. That God had opened the Red Sea. And the people of Israel have been able to pass through it. That they've been able to defeat other kings. And these rumors, this gossip, had lodged in Rahab's mind. And strangely, it had fueled faith in her mind. It had fueled faith that the God of the Israelites was the God of heaven, the living God. And because of that, she knew that she and her people could not stand against that God. She wanted to align herself with the work of the living God. We have heard. So what do you gossip about? When you go to the hairdresser? What do you gossip about at the sailing club? What do you gossip about when you sit beside someone on a train? What do you gossip about during a round of golf? Do you gossip about an answer to prayer? Just in a very natural way. Do you gossip about a verse that has spoken to you? Do you gossip about something that's encouraged you about your children taking another step forward in faith? Do you gossip, perhaps, about questions you've got about your faith? I think our not yet Christian friends need to hear about those as well. Our honesty about those. What do you gossip about? Because I pray we won't gossip negatively, but we will gossip in a way that God can sow seeds. We have heard. A second question I think Rahab would want to ask us is, how scandalized are you? How scandalized are you that God would choose to use someone of her profession? It's interesting. I think very few prostitutes actually choose that profession. Very few. It's usually circumstances. Or they've been trafficked or something awful like that. Might just be survival. Might be a way of providing for family. And yet when we hear about God using a prostitute, I think for many of us self-righteousness rises up. We get a little bit outraged. Jesus was known as, and is still, the friend of sinners. Isn't that amazing? That's amazing news for me. It's amazing news for you. He is the friend of sinners. And on an occasion in Luke chapter 7, when Jesus was invited to a Pharisee's house, a woman a sinful woman, actually a prostitute, came and she did something very, very intimate, very special to Jesus. She cried over his feet. She wiped her hair over his feet. And then she poured really expensive perfume over his feet. And the Pharisee whose house Jesus was in was outraged. If he knew what sort of woman this was, he wouldn't let her touch him. But Jesus was different. Jesus always hated sin, but loved the sinner. And God hates sin. God is holy. He's totally holy. He's utterly holy. He hates sin because what does sin do? Sin divides. Sin creates shame. Sin builds fear. Sin breaks up relationships. Sin fragments communities. God's always in the business of healing and restoring and rebuilding and giving hope for the future. And I don't know about you, but at times there can be the Pharisee in me that thinks, God, I can understand why you might use so-and-so, but surely not a person in that profession. Amazing grace that Jesus was known as the friend of sinners, and he still is. And nothing we've done will ever discount us from his grace. But how scandalized are you? And does the Lord need to just correct your thinking, my thinking? Has a bit of self-righteousness and judgment crept in? And self-righteousness and judging, what does it do? It separates people. It creates fear. It does not honor people as precious children of God. So how scandalized are you? And then thirdly, Rahab would want to say to us, are you living courageously? Are you living courageously? I think one of the reasons God used Rahab was that he looked at Rahab, he looked into her heart, and he saw courage there. It's probably true for many prostitutes, actually. He saw courage in Rahab's heart and thought, this is someone gutsy. This is someone who will align herself with a courageous, a daring plan. And she does. When the king of Jericho heard that two travelers had come to her home, what does she do? She answers very skillfully. And she hides them on the roof. And then later on, we discover that she lets them down out of her window above the city wall, lets them down on a rope so they could hide away and then return to Joshua and the troops. Rahab was courageous. And at the beginning of 2023, I think the Lord would want to say to us through Rahab, are you living courageously? Or has a bit of timidity set in? And I'm speaking to myself as well, because all sorts of things can conspire to make us timid, to stop us from taking that step or that leap of faith that God is calling us to. If we can have the next slide up, please, Josh. It's not necessarily a reckless leap. I mean, you might look at that and you think, strike a light. Lord, don't ask me to do that. The Lord doesn't ask us to be reckless, but he does say, will you be courageous? Be strong and courageous. The Lord had to say to Joshua many times. And some of you will want and need to hear that today. Be strong and courageous. Today's Epiphany, when we remember the wise men visiting Jesus, And actually the wise men had to make a choice, and it was a courageous choice. Do they listen to the voice of Herod, or do they listen to God's voice through the dream? Are they going to follow the way of fear, or are they going to follow the voice of love? And the voice of love will lead us into an open-minded, daring future. Because that's the nature of God. So, what is the Lord asking you to really step out in courage for at this time? Perhaps let the Spirit just kind of speak to you over the next week about that. And if you find yourself withdrawing from something, then there might be wisdom in that, because there can be at times, but it might be the Lord is actually saying to you, do you know what? I'm calling you to step out here. I'm calling you to take that leap of faith. So those are 3 questions I think Rahab would ask us. But just in closing, I want to offer us also 3 encouragements as we begin 2023. And the first encouragement is this. Be encouraged. The Lord values and loves to use those who we might see as more unconventional. The Lord loves that. I love the fact, looking around our church building today, as we look around, we're all sorts, aren't we? Isn't that wonderful? We are, in a glorious way. We're not all wearing the same color, thankfully. We've got lots of, we are all sorts. And that's what God delights in. We look at creation. God loves variety. God loves variety in his church. And please don't ever think, in order to follow the Lord wholeheartedly, you've got to have come from a certain background. You've got to kind of have a middle-class pattern of life, and you've got to wear navy blue. I'm sorry, I love navy blue. But, please never think that. Be gloriously yourself. Be gloriously yourself. That the Lord wants you to hear that. And he allowed Rahab to be gloriously herself in how he used her in bringing about his purposes. Be encouraged. And be encouraged too, the earlier setbacks in your life don't need to stop you from actually reaching the potential God has sown into your life, or from really fulfilling his purposes for you. Some of you might have been using these notes over the last few days. I expect Tess has, as a good clergy person. Have you, Tess? No, she hasn't. Anyway, we'll take that out of the recording. These are some notes that the 2 I have, honey. Yeah. Quietly. These are some notes that the archbishops have produced with some guests. And just to read a tiny bit of one from a couple of days ago, by a lady called Anne Wafula Strike. And she says, when I was born in rural Kenya, my father felt sure I was destined to achieve great things. So he gave me the second name, Olympia, after the home of the ancient Greek gods and of the famous sporting competition. Though after I contracted polio at the age of 2 and was left paralyzed from the waist downwards, no one imagined I would go on to win any race at all. After many setbacks and much heartache, eventually I did fulfill my father's Olympic dream for me, competing in a wheelchair racing at the Paralympics in Athens and going on to win bronze in the World Cup in Manchester. How did I make it to the finish line? Through trusting God, with the support of my family, and by never giving up, never allowing setbacks to define my reality and my destiny. Rahab didn't allow her earlier life to define her future destiny. So be encouraged. The Lord values, the Lord uses those whom we might consider more unconventional. A second encouragement, and that's that we are called to act with kindness. I heard a lovely phrase the other day in something else I was reading, that actually when we act with kindness, we ally ourselves with the Lord. Be an ally of the Lord wherever you go. Kindness isn't naivety. Kindness isn't being gullible. Kindness isn't allowing people to walk over us in an unhealthy way. That damages the image of God in us. That's not right. That's not kindness. But kindness is reaching out with grace. Kindness is looking for the good in the other person. Many of us will have all sorts of situations where actually we're thinking, Lord, I don't know what to do there. How should I respond? I love Mother Teresa's encouragement. Mother Teresa said, I'd rather make mistakes in kindness in terms of treating how we treat other people. I'd rather make mistakes in kindness. I'd rather for people to kind of meet me on a certain day and feel they were touched by God's kindness than that they felt they were judged or they were devalued in some way. Apparently, 2023 is meant to be the year of the water rabbit, whatever that means. I pray it will be a year of even greater kindness. You know, it's interesting, some of the letters and messages, emails we got after the Christmas services, within them, people commented on the fact that they felt cared for, they'd been treated kindly. From the moment they were met in a car park, people were stewarding the car park, to welcomers, to people handing out mince pies. Of course, we weren't perfect at all. But thank you for that. And may we as a church community be increasingly marked by kindness in this year ahead. I think it is a mark of SML. May it grow. Kindness. It's interesting, Archbishop Justin, in his New Year message, said he prays that we will grow kinder communities. Kinder communities. I think people are crying out for that. May we be much less quick to judge and much quicker to reach out a hand of kindness. And a third and final encouragement for us all is to embrace your new label. Embrace your new label in Jesus. The great thing is we've sung about that, and I'll come back to that in a minute. You know, Rahab is introduced to us at the beginning as a Canaanite harlot, a Canaanite prostitute. The last verse Carol read to us is rather curious because the writer of the book of Joshua wrote many years after the fall of Jericho. Rahab would have been well dead by then. And the writer wrote this rather curious comment, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. What does that mean? Well, I think it can mean a number of things. But I think, first of all, it means the legacy of her life was immense. She actually became the great-great-grandmother of King David. She's listed amongst the heroes of faith in Hebrews 11. She's mentioned in the same breath as Abraham in James 2. And in an extraordinary way, if we can have the next slide up, please. And I haven't got fixated with genealogies since the Carols by Candlelight, but she is mentioned in Jesus' genealogy. Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. this Jewish man, Salmon, married Rahab. And Rahab appears in Jesus' lineage. Isn't that extraordinary? Amazing grace. Amazing grace. But as I was reflecting on that, it would have taken some time after Salmon married her for her to begin to believe she had a new identity. The labels that are stuck on us or we put on ourselves, they don't peel away straight away, do they? God is very patient as he wants us to receive the new label that he places on each of us. In Jesus, God says to you and to me, you are precious, you are honored, you are forgiven, you are accepted, you have immense value, you have an amazing purpose and a glorious future. And I think probably amongst us today, perhaps within each of us, there are bits of our heart and our mind and our memory that kind of hanker back to the old reputation. And to kind of throw off the way we see ourselves, the way other people have spoken about us. And actually, Jesus doesn't want us to move into 2023 with that. He wants you to move into 2023 with greater freedom and greater wholeness, knowing you and I will works in progress, and we will be until glory. But he wants you to walk with that new label, to embrace that new label, that in Jesus, you are precious, you are honored, you are valued. You are named alongside Jesus. You are named alongside Jesus. Isn't that extraordinary grace? And I think so often we think, Lord, I can understand you could put that label on someone else, but not on me. But the Lord puts it on you. And just in closing, what I would love us to do, I'd love us just to open ourselves up to the Lord and to receive that truth again. Receive that truth again at the beginning of 2023. Andy, could you and the band come forward? And we sang earlier, I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Rahab would have been a slave to fear. For so much of her life, she became a precious child of God. You are a precious child of God.